Hey, and welcome to this latest Glass Lewis Proxy Talk. I'm Mike Coronado, Glass Lewis Senior Director, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to explain Glass Lewis's new Proxy Talks program. Proxy Talks are opportunities we make available for any company or shareholder involved in a proxy contest, M&A transaction, or other compelling event to speak directly with Glass Lewis clients. It is also an opportunity for Glass Lewis investor clients to hear directly from these parties and have an opportunity to ask them questions. We will always offer a proxy talk to both sides in a contested situation, as we did in this case. Glass Lewis hosts proxy talks for companies and shareholders involved in special situations to make their case and answer your questions. The views you will hear today are those of our guest speakers and have not been reviewed or approved by Glass Lewis in any way. In hosting and moderating this proxy talk, Glass Lewis is expressing no views on the proxy voting matter, and nothing on this call should be understood as Glass Lewis's proxy advice, investment advice, or solicitation of proxies. Glass Lewis, through its research team, will separately provide proxy voting advice to its clients via its proxy paper, as well as its thematic and custom voting recommendations, in line with its established conflict policies and based solely on publicly available information. Finally, a few housekeeping details. All lines have been placed on a listen-only mode for this call. For any of our investor clients that would like to ask questions of the participants today, you may do so by typing them directly into the Q&A section at the bottom of the webinar at any time. We have a dedicated time later in the presentation where questions will be addressed directly by the participants. Also, this presentation will be recorded to generate a transcript, which the participants may need to file to comply with their legal obligations. The recording and transcript will not otherwise be made available, and you are expressly prohibited from recording or otherwise distributing the proxy talk. And with that, I'm excited to turn it over to our panel. Today, we have representatives from Bluebell Capital, co-founder and co-CIO Giuseppe Bivona, and portfolio manager David Platero, who will present their case for change at BlackRock. I'll hand it over to them for their presentation. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mike, for the opportunity, and thanks to all the attendees to take the time to listen to our point of view. We want to discuss two things today. One is, what are we proposing? And the second one is, why do we think is worth your attention and support? After that, we plan to leave time for a Q&A. Before getting into any detail, we have some housekeeping items as well. All that we present today is going to be Bluebell Capital Partners' opinion and is not endorsed by BlackRock or any other companies mentioned. We do have a thorough analysis, but it is outside in, so we cannot guarantee accuracy or completeness of the information, and we cannot accept any legal responsibility. This is not a proxy solicitation nor a marketing document. We are here to present our views and hopefully convince you that they can carry some merit. With that taken out of the way, I will focus on point one. What are we proposing? And it is simple. We are adding an item number 6, to the AGM of BlackRock, proposing to split the role of CEO and chairman and to have an independent board chair. Two things are worth noticing. We are giving plenty time for this change to come through until next AGM in 2025. We want this to be an orderly transition and not a disruptive change. And second is, our views are based on a company-specific bottom-up analysis, resulting among other things from a 3-year-long relationship with BlackRock. And our conclusion is that we think our proposal will improve governance, transparency, and ultimately shareholder returns of BlackRock. We have published on our website, bluebellcp.com, our full analysis, and you're welcome to review and browse. And we also publish our answers to the statement of opposition that BlackRock filed with its proxy filing, which was published on April 4th. Today, we will provide few highlights of our analysis to give some color as to why we think this change is necessary, and we would like to have your support. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Giuseppe, the co-founder and co-CIO of Bluebell Capital Partners. Giuseppe, please.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Mike, for the introduction. The first things that I would like to make absolutely clear is this, and to some extent David mentioned already, this proxy contest is not about a philosophical discussion about which governance model is better than the other. This proxy contest is entirely based on our analysis of the shortcomings of BlackRock governance and the exercise of the stewardship function. The second thing I will also make it crystal clear that this proxy contest is not about BlackRock having to do more or less of ESG. This item and our proposal has to do with curing, in a way, the lack of board oversight in relation to the very many inconsistency between BlackRock rhetoric and BlackRock implementation of ESG policy. Having said that, let's start from the first area, which is the shortcomings in BlackRock's own governance. And actually, let's start from the core of the issue. I mean, as you obviously know, Mr. Fink, which is the co-founder of BlackRock, is also the CEO and the chairman of the organization. In a situation like this, in order to ensure the highest degree of independent oversight, obviously you need to have check and balance through the role of the lead independent director. Now, lead independent director means obviously, as the word independent is there, that is independent as other independent director, if not more. I like to think to the lead independent director, as we say, the Caesar wife. She doesn't have only to be faithful; she also has to be faithful beyond suspicion, and the same apply to the degree of independent of the lead. Now, in the case of BlackRock, the lead independent director is Murray Gerber, who actually has been sitting on the board for 24 years. We will go back to this concept, to this notion of independence. There are very strict rules from the New York Stock Exchange, as far as the, U.S. company. But the core of this is that a director, in order to be considered independent, he should not have a material relationship with the company, either directly or indirectly, through his relative. I mean, key concept is material relationship. I mean, we believe that a director which has been sitting on the board for 24 years, I mean, it's not like he has a relationship with BlackRock. To some extent, it's part of BlackRock. BlackRock must have changed the furniture in the lobby much more often, obviously, in these 24 years than, a director having an establishing relationship with the key executive and the key management figure. Interesting enough, and we have been having this conversation with BlackRock for at least the last 2 years, asking them to replace the lead independent director. Interesting enough, I would say, on November 7, BlackRock issued a press release in which essentially they say that Mr. Murray Gerber was going to not seek re-election at this AGM, and as a result, the company will have changed the lead independent director. A press release which we actually welcome. Then, a few weeks ago, on March 28th, I would say rather surprising, BlackRock issued another press release saying that actually Mr. Gerber was seeking re-election, and if re-elected, he will continue in his role as a lead independent director. But what we really think it's revealing and telling is the motivation provided by BlackRock for Ms. Gerber to remain, seek re-election and remain as a lead independent director. And the motivation is in light of the GIP transaction announced in January 2024. I think that this is a comment which in itself tells a lot about the importance that BlackRock board give to the role of the lead independent director, because this is like to say, hey, we are in the middle of a transformational deal. It's a very important strategic transaction. Who want to be bothered, with the new lead independent director, which actually may ask, challenging question, which will do his full role of, again, independent oversight. Let's keep what we already got for 24 years, maybe 1 year more, 1 year less, who care? I do care. We do care at Bluebell Capital Partner, and I hope all of you care, because quite frankly, the time in which a company needs a lead independent director, which really exercise his role of check and balance vis-a-vis the executive leadership, is exactly when you are in the middle of a transaction like the GIP transaction. So essentially, once BlackRock already decided to change the lead independent director, and I believe, I don't want to say we pressurized them in doing so, but certainly we wrote to them many times in order to accelerate this change. As the transaction materialized, that was a better thing to keep things as they were. But let me say that, put things in this way, we can draw the wrong conclusion. Then the way to address the issue would simply change the lead independent director. But that's not the case. That's not the case. If the lead independent director, instead of being Mr. Jabber, will be Joe Smith, things wouldn't change an inch for one simple reason. You need to understand what are the power and authority that the lead independent director at BlackRock was given by the board. And if this power and authority are not sufficiently strong to perform his function, it really becomes irrelevant who is the director in those shoes. And in order to perform the role of lead independent director in an effective way, you need to have the authority to do at least three things. First of all, you need to be able to call the board of director. As I can tell you, if you're not be able to call the board of director, it's kind of hard to call the board of director to fire your CEO. The second thing, you need to have the authority to guide the discussion on performance evaluation. And you, as a lead independent director, need to have the power and authority to guide the discussion on compensation. Now, as you can see in this chart, we put next to each other what are the authority conferred by the board of directors of JP Morgan to the lead independent director of JP Morgan, and the power and authority conferred by the board of BlackRock to the lead independent director of BlackRock. And essentially, other than the ability to call the meeting of all independent directors, I mean, you can see that in BlackRock case, there is absolutely, absolutely no way for whoever is in this role to exercise the three functions which I referred before. So, beside the fact that you have somebody for 24 years as a director and actually 7 years in the position of lead, if you do not have the proper power of authority, this function is meaningless. And I would say that this is telling and revealing not only of the lack, of the inefficiency, if you want, of the role, but of overall of the lack of independent oversight, because we don't think that a director should have accepted the role of lead independent unless he was given the right power of authority. And he's also telling the low degree of independent oversight within the board. We should have recognized the issue, failed to recognize the issue, and essentially has granted very weak power to the, to whoever in these shoes to perform this role. Now, I have to say that looking more broadly to the governance of BlackRock, I mean, the issue is much deeper than the one we've just highlighted, which, if you ask us, it's already very significant. I mean, I think we are all used to see BlackRock self-proclaiming itself as a defender of governance on behalf, as part of his fiduciary relationship with his clients, and essentially advocating for best governance practice as a necessary condition for sustainable economic performance. But the reality, again, it's very different. I mean, if you look to some very obvious key metrics of BlackRock parameter vis-a-vis the average S&P, well, you will find the share which has been there in BlackRock for 36 years, where the average of the S&P is less than 5 years. You find a woman representation on the board of 31% of BlackRock vis-a-vis 33%. You will find an oversized board of 16 director vis-a-vis just shy of 11. And you see the number. You don't need me to read it, but it's very clear that BlackRock, instead of being first in class, is actually below average within the S&P 500 company. Clearly, very important is the whole notion of independence. I already referred to the fact that a director sitting on the board for 24 years cannot be considered independent, particularly so if he is entrusted with the role of lead independent director. But there are other cases on the board of BlackRock, and one which I think is very interesting is Mrs. Susan Wagner. Mrs. Wagner is on the board as an independent director, but true is that Mrs. Wagner is a co-founder of BlackRock. She co-founded BlackRock together with Larry Fink, Robert Capito, in 1988 when she was 26. She'd done the whole career in BlackRock until 2012. And the day she resigned, the company announced that she was getting to the board. She clearly is a significant shareholder. Is a shareholding which most of this comes obviously for compensation from BlackRock. And actually, I think rather more interesting, she was a colleague when she was there, so now 12 years past, of 15 out of 24 executives, which are part of BlackRock Global Executive Committee. You see in this chart, the Global Executive Committee of BlackRock, you see surrounded by a red square, all the executives who were colleagues of Mrs. Wagner at the time she was still in BlackRock. So, as I said earlier, being independent means is an assessment on what is a relationship you have with a company. Company means with the management of the company, the executive leadership. It's unquestionable that Mrs. Wagner has a relationship with the company. I would say that Mrs. Wagner is BlackRock as much as Larry Fink, Bob Capito, Robert Capito are BlackRock. And quite frankly, legion of lawyers writing a legal opinion of her independence, paid with shareholder money, would not change at all this perspective. Now, interesting enough that once you have deemed Susan Wagner to be independent, then you find Mrs. Wagner in the committee of BlackRock. You will find in the risk committee and the audit committee. And I will argue that for a financial institution, the risk committee, it's most important. Managing a financial institution is managing risk more than everything else. And Mrs. Wagner is the chair of BlackRock Risk Committee. By the way, as well on this page, you will see that Mary Gerber is not in the Management Development Compensation Committee, which is at the bottom right corner of the page in front of you. Now, there are other reasons you will find them in the deck that we put on our presentation, and I'd like to go back for a second on what I say at the beginning. I mean, this is, as I hope you can see, not a broad conversation about alternative governance model. These are precise shortcomings on what the governance of BlackRock is vis-a-vis what we all consider best practice in terms of independence, independent oversight. But it's interesting that it is also fair to say that separation of CEO and chair is increasingly becoming the standard of I believe 60% of the company of the S&P 500 where there is a separate CEO and chair, and there has been an acceleration toward this model, over the last 10 years. But this year, in this proxy season, there have been other 3 companies who, like BlackRock, have been the subject of shareholder request asking to separate the role of the CEO and the chairman. We are totally stranger to the other three, which regard JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Bank of America. Now, if you go and read the rationale of supporting the request of these other three proxy contests, that's completely different. This is totally based on a boilerplate argument that the CEO shouldn't be the oversight of himself herself. An argument which, by the way, we share, except that, again, here there is much more than that. It's a discussion about the specific governance asset of BlackRock. But obviously, we were curious enough to ask how BlackRock governance will score if you put next to each other JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Bank of America. And then, you will see that BlackRock is an oversized board of 16 director, and, JP Morgan 10, Goldman Sachs 11, Bank of America 13. Now, BlackRock, who positions itself as a champion in dealing with social issues, has only a 31% of women representation on the board, 50% of JP Morgan. In the board of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Bank of America, all directors are independent except the CEO. And again, I can go over and over. You see the slides. I think it's pretty unequivocal what the conclusion is, that BlackRock score is worse than worst practice, we like to say, of all the other three, I think, except in one category, which is clearly, at least the lead of BlackRock has at least the right to convene a meeting of independent directors. Moving to the second area, we said at the beginning, one is a shortcoming within BlackRock governance. Something else is the lack of oversight of the board in dealing with the stewardship function, which obviously is critical to an asset manager. And again, there are many examples you will find in the presentation we uploaded on our website. I'd just like to run through few of those. And again, position of BlackRock on thermal coal. We all read enthusiastically, some of us less enthusiastically, other Mr. Fink statement of exiting thermal coal investment by mid of 2020. And this was a dear CEO letter, I believe, in January 2020. Well, now, if you see where are we on this issue, you will find that BlackRock today, it's a leading shareholder of most of the most important, thermal coal producer. Is a number one shareholder of Peabody, number two of Tangela, the spin-off of Anglo American, is the third largest shareholder of Glencore. And if you were going to ask BlackRock to explain this contradiction, BlackRock would say, no, it's not a contradiction, because back then we say that we were exiting from thermal coal on our discretionary investment, not on our passive and index fund, except to bet that 90% of the equity business of BlackRock is index. So it's like us at Bluebell Capital Partners say, look, we take the commitment, we wouldn't buy any bonds issued by any company who has more than 25% of the revenue from thermal coal. Guess what? We are an equity fund. What kind of commitment is this? It's just show hypocrisy. It's getting some brownie point commercially, but the substance is whether you are a leading shareholder in thermal coal. By the way, I'm not questioning whether you should be or you shouldn't be. I believe that many investors on this call have a very different view, and we respect all of those. The question is, as an asset manager, you have a fiduciary relationship. You say what you do what you say, and there is nothing else in between. So again, this is not whether you should exit or not thermal coal. It's if you say something, you behave consistently, and you don't take commitment which actually are too easy and too cheap to obtain. Same reasoning on disclosure on scope 3. Obviously, as you know, a few months ago, we had I think SEC passing a rule of disclosure on gas emission, and scope 3 has been carved out. And in June 2022, BlackRock issued a letter to the SEC making the case of why scope 3 was carved out. And Mr. Fink went on the record, went on a Bloomberg interview and say, we are not going to support scope 3. I always been loud on this. We always say that. Okay, he always say that. But then I wonder, who is the Larry Fink who wrote the Dear Client letter of 2021? Maybe his brother, who say, in 2021, I'm reading, we intend to expand our scope 3 reporting to include the aggregate emission attributable to the investment portfolio, which we manage on behalf of our clients. Again, this is not a discussion where you should include or you should exclude scope 3. Big topic, all of us may be very different view, but you cannot say in 2021 something and do exact opposite in 2022. I mean, that's just not possible. And I'd like to make another example, which I think is an amusing example, and it has to do with the AGM of luxury company, Swiss luxury company Richemont. By the way, it's 2023. We were not a shareholder. BlackRock said that we're running this campaign because we are frustrated they're voting against us. I'm frustrated because they vote against themselves. But so I just pick an example of BlackRock voting decision on Richemont AGM of 2023. There's an item, I read it, and they say, the item says, elect Wendy Luabe as director. Management recommendation 4, BlackRock vote against. And motivated why? Because Mrs. Wendy Luabe is overboard. Perfectly fine. Totally legitimate reason. Then I go on and I read this other item on the board. Elect Wendy Luabe, not the twin with the same name, still the same director, as a representative of category A registered share. The owner of the share is us, the market. We own 90% of Richemont, and somebody else, the founder, own 10%, but full control because of voting right, multi-voting right. So these other items say, do you want Mrs. Luabe to be a representative of the market? I mean, you will expect BlackRock to say no, because she's still overboard, as it was a second ago. No, BlackRock vote for. So she is fit and proper. She's not fit and proper to be on the board because she's overboard, but she's perfectly fine to be the sole representative of the shareholder owning 90% of the company. And you say, maybe this is enough. No, it's not enough. It gets even more amusing than that, because Mrs. Luabe was first on the board as in the AGM of 2020 as a representative of Mr. Rupert, the founder. So you understand what's going on. BlackRock voting that the director was prior in the board representing Mr. Rupert, now is representing the market, in spite of the fact that this director is overboard. I mean, I don't think really I need to spend more time on that. This is laughable. I mean, if it was not serious, it was laughable. Last example, I promise the last one. But you will find more. You will find more if you go through our deck on www.bluebellcp.com. I mean, BlackRock, we were curious to see how BlackRock vote in the last 3 or 4 AGM, a company like Signature Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, Bed Bath & Beyond, Inch, Lordstown Motor. Now you may say, well, why do you care about this company? By the way, I'm not an investor. Our fund is not an investor in this company, because this company were all bankrupt in 2023. They all filed for Chapter 11. Well, BlackRock vote for, in line with management recommendation, on the last 3 or 4 years you see on this page, on all of this company, for the proposal of the management, who clearly were driving this company straight into bankruptcy. Because again, the issue is not just ESG. ESG is a very small percentage, if you want, of the topic that we need to discuss. When BlackRock vote on the fiduciary relationship, particularly on stock which are in index, in passive fund, which means you cannot sell it, the only way really to exercise stewardship is voting in a correct way. And how can an asset manager consistently support management of company on all the proposal for multiple years will then end up in bankruptcy in Chapter 11. But there is a reason for that. There is a reason. And again, we were curious to understand the reason because, by the way, we have a lot of respect for BlackRock. We have a lot of respect for Larry Fink. But, clearly there are obvious shortcomings, in the setup, in the system. And I think the answer of why these things happen is pretty self-explanatory, self-evident. BlackRock votes, you take the last proxy season, they throw votes on 171,000 proposals at 14,000 company in 18,000 employee in 69 market. This is a slide we took from the summary of BlackRock voting decision, in the last proxy season, 2022, 2023. You know how many people work in BIS who was responsible for this activity? 70. So means that each professional is responsible for 200 companies. As you can see, I'm an old man. I won't be able to remember the name of the 200 company. Let's assume voting for 2,450 proposal. By the way, the proxy season is also very compressed. It's impossible. So the failure of BlackRock to perform this function is simply a reflection that, despite the rhetoric, how crucial this function is, there are no resources allocated to that. You cannot have 70 professionals voting on 14,000. We are a fund. We manage a very concentrated portfolio. We have 13, 14 stocks. It's a hell of a job voting at an AGM. So it's simply, again, the gap between how central this function is and how it's implemented. It's simply huge. And the gap between the rhetoric and the implementation of the stewardship policy eventually translated in reputational risk. It translated in the huge backlash from all sides of the equation. As I said, this is not a discussion, or everything we say still true, also, regardless of what each one will think about coal, about ESG, about anything, around this topic. This has to do with the fact that, let's imagine, say something, you look what the act, and you draw some judgment. And I want to add that we didn't cherry pick the example I showed you, just look into whatever, the 170,000 voting decision, you always find something wrong. No, we bump into that every time we vote in an AGM, and when we find BlackRock as a fellow shareholder. And I tell you, it happened, unfortunately, all the time, to the point that if a BlackRock climate risk is investment risk, for us, a Bluebell capital partner, BlackRock is investment risk. Because everything else equal, I prefer to be an investor where BlackRock is not a fellow shareholder. And so, again, it's no wonder this backlash from all sides. And I think it's absolutely right, the general attorney of the state of Tennessee, in which it appears that BlackRock have settled on a strategy of telling both sides what they wanted to hear in an effort to keep everyone business. And what is the response of BlackRock? Well, the response of BlackRock is, well, I'm not going to use the word ESG anymore because ESG has been weaponized. So it's a Larry Fink, 25th of June, 2023. And in fact, in the last year and this year, dear CEO, dear client letter, the word ESG has disappeared. By the way, has already been replaced by new buzzword like transition investment in the private sector and so on and so forth. But the same things happen in relation with the recognition of the existence of this particular category of reputation risk, which is what we call greenwashing at the end of the day. And it's obvious that BlackRock is more exposed than anybody else to greenwash, not necessarily because they're doing anything bad, but because they told more about this issue. So more you end up in the risk that you oversell ESG related feature to your product, and you end up caught in potentially the consequence of greenwashing risk. Well, what is the response of BlackRock to greenwashing risk? Same to ESG was being weaponized. We just don't use the word greenwashing. So if you go and check the 10K of BlackRock, well, you will find that very differently from US listed asset manager like Blackstone, Invesco, KKR, State Street, you don't find the word greenwashing. You don't find greenwashing recognized as a standalone source of risk. Look, I want to conclude because I want to leave a question, time for question. And obviously, I hope that the conclusion obviously is please vote for on item 6 on our agenda. I mean, it's really a short subset of argument which you will find in a 90-page deck, and again, I mean, we've been engaging with the company. Unfortunately, if we felt almost forced to run this proxy contest as we could not get any solution, any attention on the issue that we mentioned for again 2-3 years of our attempt to constructively work with BlackRock to fix the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Giuseppe. So now we'll open up for Q&A. So we invite anybody in attendance to ask any questions you may have via the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom webinar. And David and Giuseppe will do their best to get through as many as they can.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you very much, Mike. I already see it is filling up. The first question we have is if in our 3 years relationship, did we perceive flexibility from Larry Fink to step down as chair?
Look, obviously, if we are at this stage, I would say the answer is pretty obvious. The answer is not. I mean, as I said, we start engaging with BlackRock. As a matter of fact, I believe it was early January 2021. And then when we try also to involve them in some of, the situation we're involved, asking, again, more than asking attention. When you are a leading shareholder, you own 6-8% of virtually any large company in the world. Well, you have a duty, if you ask us, beyond your fiduciary issue with your own client. No, they are relevant, very relevant, not just for their own client, relevant for anybody else, because they do command a lot of votes. I think we wrote to them the first time in November 2022, and we've been asking them 3 things: separate chair and CEO, replace the lead independent director, and initiated a strategic review on ESG. And I was happy for a few weeks or months. We were happy when they said they were replacing the lead independent director, but I was too optimistic in assuming that what they were saying was true, because they took it back as soon as the window to close for the proxy season closed. So no, there's not a lot of flexibility, and I think it's a mistake, because I believe that again, this is not a campaign against Larry Fink. We have a lot of respect for Larry, for what he's done, for how he contributed to shape up the industry. But clearly, the number one item on the agenda is succession. I think the guy is 72 years old, and I think there is a limit on 75. So now is the time to split chair and CEO, because this figure in 2 years' time will be massively helpful for the new CEO which will come on board. And if for, again, the co-founder, you may argue that at least for some part of the life of BlackRock, couldn't make sense. We believe governance, the best governance strategy is also depend on where are you in the life cycle of the company. But obviously, we are in the mature status of BlackRock. And so we think that this is the time to do it, to appoint an independent chair, so that it helps to manage the transaction. But the short answer is no.
Thank you. Combining a couple more questions coming through. One is, who would you recommend as independent chair? And related to this, if the proposal is voted by the shareholders, how will you help BlackRock to appoint a new chair?
Look, I think that the issue of lack of independent oversight is so profound, and I give, it's also wide in terms of the main example we give, that this board has been completely passive. You don't need an active shareholder based in London to tell this company what they're doing wrong, which is so obvious, so evident. You know, you work in a company, you don't want to have your name in the press, maybe even for opposite reason, every day from the States, from in the UK, in Asia. That's not the type of publicity a company. So they have a gigantic problem. And if the board hasn't fixed so far, you know, by the way, this is a very prestigious board. I consider the most exclusive club you have in the States, you know, with the Nixon and the Ford. And of course, how do without the CEO of Aramco? You know, you only talk about net zero. The first name come to the, in terms of appointing a new director, is somebody obviously was done oil and had carbon for all his life. There is obviously something wrong. This board is not equipped to think in terms of independence. I think it's very bad decision made to ask Mr. Geber to stay in light of the GIP transaction. This should be the motivation to replace it, not to have it. So my short answer again, no, there is nobody on the board which I guess, but this is for the reason why we are asking the board, we are asking, sorry, shareholder to approve the resolution coming into effect at the AGM 2025, because clearly there is a lot of work which has to be done to choose the proper chair, you know, proper independent chair, and start fixing the governance of this company.
Thank you. Again, combining a couple of questions that are coming through. One is BlackRock had an impressive total shareholder return of 9,000%, as they say in the opposition statement. And also there are other targets, you know, other asset managers with combined CEO chair. So why change at BlackRock and other places, and why challenging BlackRock on given the strong returns?
All right, I think that two separate questions, and I will try to respond them separately. Well, I love the first question. I mean, and actually, I think there's a couple of slides, David, if you help me to put on the screen, because it is true. In the best line of defense that BlackRock like to use it is that the amazing performance of the total shareholder return since the IPO relative to the performance of the S&P 500. Exactly right. In the, you know, if you see, this is in every relevant communication with the market. David was showing the chart before, if you please go back a second, which is on the CEO the investor letter 2024. I believe this was also in a couple of years dear CEO letter. This is, of course, in the statement of opposition to our proposal. And if you look to this graph, so if you look to the return of BlackRock shares relative to the S&P 500 from the 1st of October 99, which is the day of the IPO, to today. I mean, I'm referring to this graph because that's one used, I believe, in the last year client's letter. Go to 31st of December 2023. You find that the BlackRock stock has returned roughly 9,100. So you had 100 and in the at the IPO, now you have 9,200. And the S&P, you know, if you had invested 100 on the 1st October 99, it will be worth 586. Now, I'm telling you, this graph, it's a very peculiar graph because it has a two features difficult to obtain. One, it's factually correct. This is factually correct. It is equally factually deceptive and misleading. Very rare to have in the same graph. And you know why? Because if you break up this graph, the return, in two different periods, from the IPO to 2009 and from 2009 to 2023, you will find a message which the chart that BlackRock like to show doesn't tell you. And the message is that the stock of BlackRock delivered an amazing total return to shareholder until 2009. Amazing. Like, again, 1,378 vis-a-vis $88 of $100 invested on the day of the IPO to 2009. But from 2009 onward, the the share of BlackRock share, so the total return has been exactly the same, moving in line with S&P. So BlackRock has not delivered any overperformance to the S&P. I will argue that is the same return, more volatility, lower Sharpe ratio, not the S&P. And by the way, I don't think that this date of 2009 is very coincidental. This is, of course, is the year of the BGI deal. And if you ask me, again, a lot of respect for Mr. Fink, but I think he destroyed asset management the way we knew before. Before it was done by research, fundamental research, macro research, research on the industry, on the company, and it transformed an index business, which is very little to do with asset management as we knew before. What has been the result of that? That with the BGI deal and the massive growth of the index business, you ask me, I believe that Mr. Fink has transformed BlackRock share in an ETF on the market, which is perfectly correlated. So again, I can see that the founders, Mr. Fink, Mr. Capito, Mrs. Wagner, can rightly so congratulated for the huge value they created up to 15 years ago. But unfortunately, I have to look to the present, the recent past, and the future. And the path is completely different from the waste pitch. By the way, if you compare BlackRock performance to the peers, which BlackRock shows in the 10K, I believe when they talk about remuneration, well, you see that BlackRock is in the middle of the pack and sliding down.
Thank you, Giuseppe. One more question coming from the list is, have you tried to cooperate with BlackRock on any project during this period engagement?
I tell you a little story which maybe be amusing and make somebody laugh. But when at the end of 2020, when the initial days of our fund, we were doing our initial activist campaign, and we realized that BlackRock was the leading shareholder, like 6, 8, 9% of the company we investing. Very often, we were taking the time to write personally to Larry Fink a letter in which say, this is the company, this is the issue, this is our research, literally giving him, a pen drive or something, say with 100 documents attached, all sent and couriered to him personally. Now the guy must have thought, who is this guy who sent me this stuff? I'm the CEO of BlackRock. Why they send these things? Now you know why he sent them to him. Because from the early days, we have been trying to ask for the cooperation of BlackRock at the highest possible level. It's a necessity. As I say, if you are, top shareholder of a company, you're not a 0.5 shareholder. What you do affect everybody else. So we want to make sure that he knew all the information we had, so he can make his informed decision, even opposite of ours. But at least having a dialogue. And I have to say, we never find any sort of response, to the point that in one of the cases, I mean, we launched an UN PRI petition, no, and BlackRock is a signatory of the UN and PRI, and they say in a statement, we BlackRock will promote acceptance and implementation of the principle within our industry. And our petition was ask this company, the case was Solvay, to implement SDG 14, which is on the preservation of the ocean. It's very uncontroversial, very muted response. And when you have the leading shareholder with a muted response, well, that's a problem. That's why I say, for us, a Bluebell Capital partner, BlackRock is a source of investment risk.
And actually, following on this, one question is, BlackRock remained, one of the largest asset manager globally. So, what is this reputational risk that you see? Is it life-threatening?
Look, I think there is a long. I mean, the whole proposition of an asset manager, more than any other industry, it's fiduciary. So as long as, and we see a lot of very big and large asset manager, lose. We see what happened when they start losing, trust, faith, and confidence. So I don't think we can dispute that the single most important asset that BlackRock has on his book, it's a faith, trust, and confidence of the own client and as a market as a whole. Particularly as a leading asset manager, they should be setting the highest standard for the industry. So I think the risk is significant. I mean, I think there is a couple of slides that we put in the deck that I don't know whether you can pull them out, where we show how BlackRock has been voting at the AGM on ESG related issue in accordance with the flow. You're exactly right. Well, you can see that in 2021, BlackRock backed whatever, more than 40% of sustainability proposal. One of the influence in ESG, was very high. And then now, obviously, it seems that it's losing a bit of steam commercially. Well, the interest of BlackRock in supporting this proposal has fallen, to a single digit. I mean, I think a bit of sense of humor never hurt, but say that Mr. Fink and Mrs. ESG are starring in going with the flow, I don't think a stretch of imagination, quite frankly. And we can see, what is the risk of reputation? Again, you're naming the press for the wrong reason. I mean, I think I don't know, David, there was a couple of pages where we put all the article on. Exactly right. No, thank you for that. All the article on the FT, or some article on the FT, in which essentially BlackRock was accused of misleading consumer about the real scope of ESG. So is the perception to work. And then we have an equal number of articles which say exactly the opposite. And what is the conclusion? The conclusion is not what Larry Fink said. If I get criticized left and right, south, north, east and west, it means I'm doing something right. No, it means you're doing everything wrong. That's what it means.
Thanks. Looking at the questions, there is one more. Why did you ask to split the roles as CEO and chair as a change in bylaws rather than just a change in policy?
All right, it's a bit. The answer, I would say, it's a bit practical, because according to BlackRock interpretation of current rules, and I would say we concur with that, shareholder are allowed to put only one item on the agenda. Now, we could have asked in a normal situation, and explain why this is not normal to some extent, simply to adopt a policy to change the CEO, to change the governance, split the role of the CEO and chair, assuming that there is a chair. Now, in the case of BlackRock, the role of the chair, according to the bylaws, and thanks again for showing this chart. That's what the Article 4.4.1 says, that the chairman, the appointment of the chairman is totally discretionary. So what we need to have in the case of BlackRock is making sure that there is a chairman, and there has always been a chairman, but it has been a chairman as long as it was also the CEO in the person of the founder, Larry Fink. So we have to make sure A, that there is a chair, and B, that this chair again is independent. So that's why we ask to change the bylaw. I have to say that because in the opposition statement, BlackRock say, well, but if you do this in the bylaws, which by the way is done in many parts, then it becomes too rigid, and this situation change we cannot change. But I will argue, if the situation change, then at the board initiative you can again change the bylaw. But not to give them any excuse, we, Bluebell Capital Partner, reach out to them and say, look, if you decide by the 15th of April, to give enough time to have a split chair and CEO and appoint an independent chair, we essentially renounce to our proxy contest. We remove our item. In other words, if the company does on its own, I don't care how they do that, whether they change policy or something else. To me, what it matters is the substance of it, not the formality of where the change is in there. I mean, obviously, BlackRock did not take our proposal. And so again, that's why That's something that the shareholder can vote. But actually, David, if I answer this, I think you were asking me a question which I haven't answered, because you asked me before also another question, which is other asset manager or other financial institution have a CEO and chair. Why did we choose BlackRock as opposed to somebody else? If I remember, and I don't want to avoid this question because I believe it's an intelligent question. Whoever asks it, this is go back to what we say at the beginning. I mean, I believe that there are very fine company, including asset manager. I believe that all the listed ones, the street is one of those where there is a combined CEO and chair. But when there is enough check and balance to ensure that the governance work perfectly fine. This is not an issue of not having a combined role of CEO and chair. This is an issue of the wrong application of this governance model, which can perfectly function. No, in the case of BlackRock, I made an example before of JP Morgan proxy contest. No, JP Morgan has chair and CEO combined. There is a lead independent director, which, if I'm correct, I think has been there
another 20 years, I think.
Exactly. I would say a couple of decades. But what is the fundamental difference between JP Morgan from that perspective and BlackRock? the lead independent director sitting on the board of JP Morgan can call the board, as I say, on the compensation. Exactly as we said before, he got the discussion on the performance, on the valuation, and on the successor issue. So it is not just the combination of the combined role which worries us. It's nothing to do with that. It's implementation, and again, in light of the practical things that we discussed. So this is not nothing philosophical here. It is the practical observation of the shortfalls of a company that unfortunately we have observed for more than 3 years now.
And I think related to this question, Giuseppe, one more is, do you believe all these issues at BlackRock are operational processes issues or are governance related?
But look, there is we mentioned in this call a lot of things which obviously mighty BlackRock and small Bluebell Capital Partner disagree. Okay, but there is one thing that we agree. The things we agree that having a solid and a good governance is necessary, not sufficient, but necessary to have a sustainable economic performance. Now, vice versa means that if you don't, sooner or later, you will sorely regret. And that's the case we're making. It is factual that BlackRock stopped to deliver overperformance over the S&P the way they're looking 15 years ago. We're very pleased of the GIP transaction. You know what? I think this deal should have been done, or similar strategic deal should have been done several years ago. It took far too long to the company to understand where they were losing their competitive edge. I think if we had a proper governance, which is not, again, which is not kind of hostage of one strong leadership character, would have been recognized much longer, and we as a shareholder will enjoy much better performance than we have.
I think that's all the time we have for questions today, gentlemen. Sorry to cut you short there. I can give you a minute to say any last remarks, and then we can sign off here.
But look, first of all, I would like to thank you, Glass Lewis, to have hosted this section, and of course, to all fellow shareholders to listen to us. I think our last word with you is BlackRock AGM, 15th of May, item 6. Please vote for. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks again to David and Giuseppe for their informative presentation and time today. And thanks everyone in attendance for your interest and participation. And we'll see you at the next Proxy Talk. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.